let's pivot here to the FKT scene. We touched on it at the beginning of the pod.
Yeah.
You said that this could be the future of competition in the US.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
I'm pretty passionate about this because like I find it very I think sad is the best word, where like US athletes have to go to Europe to race something that's like steep and technical. The United States has so many mountains. Like the Sierra alone is just like absolutely insane. People should not have to go to UTMB to race like a steep mountain 100 miler. And granted, like there are a ton of reasons to go to UTMB. That's not just to race a steep mountain race. I think the biggest problem with the US is just like anything that's like super steep and mountainous, heavily protected. And so a traditional race is just not going to happen there. And so my big thing is, I think FKTs and kind of more disaggregated racing could be huge because it opens up some of these protected lands for racing, especially when the sport is just, kind of in its infancy. Like I think ultra and trail running is the United States, where competition is kind of diluted and athletes are always going for a course record. This allows, this is the level of competition is basically the same. And I think from a financial standpoint, I like it because it's free. People don't have to pay, and athletes can organize their season around FKTs. Like you could sit down right now and plan FKTs you're going to do in 3 years. Whereas I would love to race in hard rock, but I don't have, the time, the interest, my moment in the sport, I feel like is so fleeting when you're peaking, even if it is 10 years long. Like it could take 7-8 years to get into hard rock. It's like, it's just like crazy. And especially when locals who kind of live there and people who have the ability to go and volunteer at the course kind of have it on lock. So it seems like a fantastic race. I've never been, but it's just like not a sustainable and like logical and realistic way for athletes to compete.
Well, two things there I want to comment on. The first is I've heard a lot of Euro athletes that come over here to do our races say that the first thing that they notice is the absolute wildness of the West and just how expansive it is, how far removed it is from major metro areas. There's this quote that I come back to a lot in a lot of my work, and it goes something like, escape competition through authenticity. Nobody is better at being you than you. And I feel like if we're going to build a brand in the US, maybe we should just lean on what we're already good at, which is these opportunities for FKTs, because if we don't, we're going to exclude some of the best areas in the country, like the Northeast, like parts of the Sierra. And people are already commenting on how this is part of our brand.
Yeah. I have this idea where kind of like the big problem is with FKTs is they're, in my opinion, there's just not enough rules for them in some ways. There's just not enough rules for them to really kind of like supplement racing entirely. And then the other issue is they've just like, the competition just isn't concentrated enough. Like there's just so many FKTs out there, especially to someone just like walking into the sport. Like you have to be in the sport for years to kind of figure out what matters and what doesn't. So I kind of have this idea of like breaking like a site that like breaks the US up into, kind of based on the quality and the amount of trail running there, breaks it up into different regions, and then kind of like establishes like a race series in each area. So, to start, you could even think about it as like, I think it could go much more granular than this, but like you could just start, it could just be like, the mountain West, or the West, central mountains. And then like, I don't know what, no offense to everyone living in the Midwest and the South. I lived in Virginia for a long time, but like lump the Midwest and the South together. Sorry. And then the Northeast, and you could establish like trail marathon, trail 50-miler, trail 100-miler in each area, lay out some basic ground rules. And then
like what Jared Campbell's done with like the Wasatch area.
Yeah. So Jared Campbell has like Millwood 100 in the Whirl. He's got like a landing page for each one of these courses that he set up. Everybody who races it can send their like trip report and everything to him. And then he posts it and he breaks out, who's the fastest. I think it would be, I'm envisioning something a little bit more, a little bit more robust than that. Whereas like, hey, look, like you can go and you can rank, you could break people out, everybody who's ever finished it by, the time they finished, you could break it out by age group, by gender, and have like rules for each race that are very similar, each effort that are very similar to a race, as far as like where you could get aid. A lot of this would just be on kind of the honor system, kind of doing it properly. I think all attempts would have to be public. That way, people can go out and audit, certainly someone who's like very competitive, people could just go out and just show up on the course and kind of see what's up. And then what is different between this and FKTs? So number one, it would be controlled. So there'll only be a couple races in each region. Number two, there would be rules. And then I'm blanking on what the other, and then number three, I would love to structure them so they could be raced like races. So there are ample aid opportunities. So that way you could take a time that you ran on some 50 miler and you can reasonably compare it to other 50s, where it's not just like an unsupported loop, in the backcountry entirely. I was trying to, I love up in Washington and out in the Sierra, and these areas are just so remote. It just becomes really, really tricky to get aid access. So it's like really easy to draw like a really steep 100-miler in the Sierra, but it's really hard to draw that if you're trying to get aid every 15 miles. It's like, near impossible. So I think
when you sent me that info, I was like, dude, I got to send this out to the rest of the world. Be like, no. Like, we have to, the logistics aren't quite there yet.
Yeah. It's tricky. And then the other problem is like out West, like a lot of the trails just go between the peaks. And so like, if you really want to start stacking vert and tagging the tops of mountains, at least in the Sierra, it's going to be off trail. It's going to be some scrambling that's involved, which I think is totally awesome. I think the biggest thing with this is like, I can't even build out, what I want to do race wise in a couple of months. Like you just never know what training opportunities are going to present themselves. You never know just how you're going to feel. And you see this with UTMB. It's like a lot of US runners are like, well, I signed up. I don't feel great. I got into the race. Who knows when this is going to happen again? I feel like I have to go and race. And then they DNF. And then you probably have other athletes that are like, shit, I could have done real well in UTMB, but I'm just not there. I didn't do the qualifying races. I didn't go through all the BS, with like sacred stones or whatever they're coming up with. So
racing when you're ready, when things are clicking, that's huge. That's what this affords. Yeah,
exactly. And further, it just makes it, accessible to anyone at any price point to go out and race at any time, which I think is pretty cool.
I mentioned Joey Campanelli earlier on the podcast. I think he has like the Nolan's FKT and a couple other cool ones. Yeah. And he's been saying this for years. I'm like, dude, why don't you enter into these 100-mile races? He's like, well, because I want to run when I'm ready to run. Yes. And like some random date in the future doesn't make sense to me. I'm going to go when things are clicking. And I don't know if I ever truly appreciated that until I talked to you and you had the same opinion. I'm like, yep, that validated it.
Yeah. Joey's the man. Yeah. Well, and then the other thing is like, I don't like I've never been to UTMB, but I was talking, Hillary McCloy, Andrew's girlfriend. I was talking to her and she was talking about OCC, talking about like, race starts at, I think this was OCC. I think I was talking to her. It was like race starts at 7, you get on a bus at 2 a.m., it takes you to somewhere else at 3 a.m. It's like, my God, like, there's 10 billion people. It's like, I don't want to, huge lines on like all the climbs, huge bottlenecks. It's like, I don't want to deal with that. Personally, I don't even want to deal with like a 6 p.m. start for UTMB. Yeah. It's just all this other kind of like BS that you can kind of strip away. It's like, personally, I do like the community. I do like, races kind of, but it's like the biggest thing for me is like, I like trail running because I love being out there, and just hiking is too boring. And this is just like faster than hiking. And I can like connect places on the map, which I think is just so cool, and just like travel through the mountains. And 99% of the time I run entirely by myself. And I think that's the best part. I don't need a ton of other people around me to have a race experience.
Well, so. You said this, I thought, really eloquently earlier in the show. And that is that technology is just on a day-to-day basis improving its ability to allow people to compete remotely, like better than ever before. And that's disrupting this whole model. And maybe Strava has a better role to play with it in the future. These websites you're talking about do. I'm excited. And one other thing I want to say is I just had this guy, Matt Taylor from Tracksmith, on the podcast, and I asked him what he thinks the key to growing the sport of mountain running is. And he actually thinks that it's the FKT, because a lot of people have grown up in this sort of like Guinness Book of World Records culture where they can understand the concept of a fastest known time in the context of that whole framing. Yeah. And I think that if we want to make more people excited about the sport and just understanding it better and appreciating what goes into it, I think fastest known time is a cool entry point.
No, and certainly. And like the craziest thing to me is like every race, there is a discussion during the coverage of the course record. It's like something that excites and motivates people.
Yep.
But it's like, it's just crazy because like if the weather isn't there, it's like we're always racing on a completely different stage. It's like every time we do an ultra, it's a little, every time there's a trail race, it's a little bit different than when it was done in the past because over a longer effort, weather and conditions. And in the Northeast, it's huge because it's so technical. A lot of it is just, it's honestly insane. It's honestly insane how much and it fucking pisses me off every time I do it. And like every time I race in the Northeast, I'm like, that's it. This is the last time because like I'm trying to time it so that there's water and streams for me to drink out of, but ideally the ground isn't like muddy or wet and the rocks aren't slippery and the temperatures are low enough. And in the whites, the wind has to be low enough and there has to be good visibility. And there's just like 10 billion factors you have to juggle while trying to do this effort. And like a race, there's like a 1 in a million chance that those conditions are going to be good, on the day you pick to do a race. But on FKT, you can pick any day, or some sort of disaggregated race, you can pick any day. So I think this whole disaggregated racing idea, the one course that I have found that I do feel strongly about is that White's 100. And I think I'm 99% going to go back and race that next summer. And to any other athletes out there on the 100-mile scene that are looking for something burly, but don't want to try with the whole, BS with UTMB, that is like a very, very worthy alternative. That is like a fantastic, fantastic route. And it is leagues more technical than I think any other trail, competition on the planet. And it is very steep. And there also are quite a few aid opportunities. There's like lots of road crossings.
Yep.
There's places where you can stash aid and you pass through all the huts and everything. So you could get stuff out of the huts. So it is kind of accessible in that way too. And all the road crossings make it really easy to go out and kind of like test parts of the course and try it out and, recon it. So
one last thread I want to cover before we go into the lightning round is the FKT recently set on the White Mountain Hut Traverse. I think that Buzz Burrell and Peter Bachwin at fastestknowntime.com, they recognize this as one of the premier FKTs in the US. For anybody that is unfamiliar, can you just give them sort of like an advertising pitch for what is so cool about this route, what's involved, etc.?
I think the Prezi is their premier.
Okay, I thought it was White Mountain, but anyway,
it might be.
It should be. I think
it should be. No, it should be. And I am the manager for the Southeast United States. I'm the regional editor for FKT.com.
Sweet.
And so, I could talk to Peter and Buzz about getting that changed. Having done both of them, the Hut Traverse is way better. I mean,
what's cool about it?
Yeah. So the Hut Traverse. So there are 8 huts run by the Appalachian Mountain Club in the White Mountains in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And these huts are staffed by probably, 5 to 7 people, I think.
Katie Scheid used to be one of them.
Katie Scheid used to be one of them. There was another, Hillary
Girardi. She's also fantastic. Yeah.
I think she was also worked at a hut.
Yep, she did.
Yeah.
She's a Black Diamond athlete, I think, maybe Scarpa.
Yeah. She, and so, the Hut Traverse, it connects the furthest, what would it be? The furthest northeast hut with the most southwest hut. the effort is about 45 miles, about 16,000 feet of gain. And it just covers like two of the kind of like premier, most popular, kind of coolest running areas in the Whites. So that's the Presidential Range and then the Pemigewasset Wilderness.
Yep.
And unlike the Pemi Loop and the Prezzies, which have become like major trade routes, the Hut Traverse features a lot of terrain that's, you know, traveled much less frequently, and kind of, you know, an opportunity to get off the beaten path while also kind of hitting these like kind of highlight areas. So I loved it because the effort has a huge history of competition. If you look on the FKT page, I mean, people have been racing this back to the early 20th century.
Yep.
And then the huts are just, you know, so kind of like storied and have just like, you know, this fantastic, you know, kind of feel to them, and it's like a great vibe. And it's just a lot of fun because the people who work at the huts are, you know, they do a hut traverse, you know, it's like a big kind of rite of passage, I think, for people who work at the huts doing a hut traverse. So they do them a lot. So they're very appreciative, I think, of anybody who, or very, very nice to anyone who does a hut traverse. So when I was training it a lot, you know, I got to know a lot of the hut crew, which was a lot of fun.
There's great names too, like Lake of the Clouds and Zealand Falls and all these. I mean, it's got some great lore to it, and they branded it well.
Yeah. So the traverse goes from the Carter Notch Hut.
Carter Notch that's my favorite one.
Yeah, that's
in the Wildcat Range there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, really cool. And I highly recommend to anyone doing it, even if they're just doing it for funsies, to sleep. I mean, it's like $1 billion to sleep at one of these huts. It's like $120 or something ridiculous. I mean,
oh, dude, I slept on the floor when I was a through hiker a couple of years back. I just slept. I slept on the floor and like, okay, you can sleep here tonight. I just like slept like underneath like the kitchen counter or something.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's like $120 or something ridiculous, but it includes breakfast and dinner. And it's like, I mean, it's going to like benefit like an organization that's pretty cool. But yeah, I slept at one of the, you know, at the Carter Notch Hut the night before. And then I ran it through to Lonesome. Yeah, I think having run like quite a few places in the US, having done like rim to rim on the Grand Canyon, just kind of run, you know, all over the Sierra and, you know, in the Pacific Northwest and Colorado. I think this is personally the best route, the best like day FKT, like in the US. Like it is just fantastic given the ground it covers, the history, and just like the great running. And the running is so varied. Like there are sections that are kind of flowy and through the forest and, you know, super low down. And then there's sections that are above tree line and are super exposed and are super rocky and involve like a little bit of scrambling and stuff. So, and then also for about 40% of the route, you're on the AT, which I always think is pretty fun. So yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I like to prop up a lot of these Northeast FKT efforts when I can. And that's an FKT that transcends any region, as I think you can attest to. It's one of the coolest.
Yeah. And if anybody wants to feel the little documentary that they shot with German,
show notes,
Ranger, running with Katie Scheid is like fantastic for Katie's FKT.
Yep.
And Katie still has the female FKT up there. So